Welcome to the Smart Factory.
Hello, everybody, and great to see you. If this is, I've been participating in so many webinars over the past 5-6 months that I can't count them. And to be honest, the ones I like the most is the ones where we have the ability to talk to people, like we have for all the presentations that we have had during the week, and also the ones tomorrow. However, sometimes we just have to accept that the world is a quite large place, and Diego Diaz, who is the speaker, so to speak, in this event, he is worth listening to, and even he lives in Dallas, so there's like 6-7 hours time difference, and he is extremely busy because he moved to a new position in a new printing company, I think a couple of months ago, from the Bernard Group in Chanhassen to ProPrint in Dallas. So coming from a 600-700 people company to I think it's 12-15 people company there is, of course, totally different from what he is normally doing. Before, I want to show the conversation I had with him Saturday, and also his ideas and presentations. It's quite simple, the presentation he has given, but we had a good conversation about it, I think. I want to share one thing about, just to give you an idea, what kind of company the Bernard Group is. The Bernard Group is it's an employee-owned printing company, which is more common in the US than in Europe. It is a company driven by a very, very well-developed digital mindset. They don't have like a legacy company coming from an offset or traditional world. They started as a digital, and they are fully digital. It's a really large company. They have an annual growth of 20+% a year. They are both in large format with a lot of EFI equipment. They are in commercial print with a lot of HP equipment. And it's automated more than most printing companies I've visited over the years. Just to give you an example, if you have like a company with 600-700 employees, one of the things they did in order to use the digital mindset and also implement Industry 4.0 measures in how they monitor the operation, they exchange all the light bulbs of the lamps in the entire building with these Philips Hue that basically have each of the lamp bulbs have an IP address. So they included the IP addresses of all the lights in the facility to the workflow. So if an error is detected somewhere in the building, it changes the light to red immediately. So you can see exactly if there's a physical bottleneck or if there's a workflow bottleneck that is specifically in that part of the building. When I was there 2 years ago, they got a job where they had more than 1 million different items that were going to be delivered to companies, retailers around the globe. And they all had to be delivered at the exact same day, and there was no there was no way where they were not allowed to deliver one day before, one day after. So the logistics of this was more or less automated. The production planning of all these items were planned according to when it needed to be shipped in order to reach the specific place, and it was from Hong Kong to the US to Europe. So that was like a truly global delivery thing they had to put into action, and everything was managed from a very, very dedicated understanding of how important a workflow is, and of course a very valuable company. A final thing I just wanted to also tell in this story is also that the reason why we were there was because we were invited by InFocus and Telia Labs, because InFocus with the Switch is of course a very eminent player in the workspace of the Bernard Group, but also Telia Labs that came in as a new vendor, recently, maybe a year's time before we went there, actually turned the pre-press IT department, because with a lot of work coming through the machines, the imposition work of it was based on template. It was more or less, it wasn't manually, but it was the template that had to be created for the specific outputs and jobs and things like that. And what they did with the Telia Labs Phoenix, they basically used the APIs to automate almost all processes about impositioning. And the company ended up having a last minute imposition thing where basically, as also Gert from CERN told just before, you basically let the operator pull the job and it will be imposed on the fly in order to reach the right machine, the right format for the right binding afterwards as well. So quite amazing, and a company and a guy. And we had the pleasure also to have Diego speaking at a conference in Denmark, organized by GRACOM, the Federation of Printers here in Denmark. And I think that Diego, he likes Europe. So if you have opportunities to have somebody who really have hands-on this one, I think you should definitely reach out to him. I'm sure that he will love that. But let me start the video of the pre-recorded sessions I did with him. And as we don't have any questions we can ask Diego, I will be happy to answer the questions I can, but let's start watching the video first. Thank you very much, guys.
I take that a lot of people will think that this is an the Skype episode, but this is actually a pre-recording for our Smart Factory Learn With Us that we're doing this week. And the reason why this is actually the only presentation at all that we're doing pre-recorded, and it's because my good friend Diego Diaz, he is in Dallas, so it would be so unfair to him to ask him to get up like 3 o'clock in the morning to participate in this event. So Diego, so nice to see you again. I hope you're good. Now this is Saturday afternoon, and it's been a while since we talked the last time. So how are you?
I'm doing well, Martin. Doing well. The move is nice. Not as much snow. Family's enjoying the sun.
That's cool. And for the people that don't know, you moved from Chanhassen in Minnesota to Dallas in Texas, right? So I think that you will almost never see snow when you're in Texas, right?
That's right. And no more having to blink so your eyes don't freeze.
That is good, especially because you spend some time watching computer screens from time to time, so you need to have a clear eye, right?
Exactly.
So you moved from I think from a position in a company that I think a lot of people have been jealous with you at, because you have done something quite spectacular with the Bernard Group in Chanhassen. How is it to move to a way smaller company? We're not talking so much about the company, but in general, I could imagine that what you're facing is probably what more normal-sized printing companies are facing of challenges right now.
For me personally, it's definitely a culture shock going from a big established company to building a company. I've built a small company before, and I think these things are, the same way that most women forget how difficult childbirth can be. I think we forget how difficult this can be. But building something again from scratch like this is it's worth the effort. But it can definitely be effort.
I remember when we met in Denmark 1.5 years ago, I think it was, not for the non-event, but for the presentation you gave. First of all, you were sick at that time. Maybe it was a culture shock coming to Denmark as well. But I remember that you said to me in the interview I did with you that it's definitely worth the effort to do automation and use the technology to support your business. With the knowledge you have now, is that still on the radar from your perspective?
Oh yes, it is absolutely worth doing, and one of the things that excited me about this opportunity is, we're trying to build a company right from the ground up this time. So rather than taking a existing company and adapting it, which can be a great thing because you have the momentum of that company already existing, but comes with a lot of challenges. You end up having to undo as much as you're doing. to building a company from the ground up with automation in mind. That's, in a lot of ways, it's easier. Building a company is difficult, but building it from the ground up the right way is a lot easier.
And talking about building up from ground up, is ProPrint like a totally new company built from the ground up, or is it just like a smaller company that have decided to move into a new direction?
No, it's a new company from the ground up, just made by industry veterans. Every single person in this company has been around from some of the best companies around in this area, and we all know what we're doing, so it's just a matter of making the rubber hit the road.
So are you just wishing that you also had like some kind of automation tool for the process between people in different positions?
No one makes that one yet.
No, not yet, but we can ask some of our friends to do that kind of stuff. I think that's that's the next step of how we connect the dots human to human, right? Well, Diego, we have agreed that because you have made a presentation, not just a few slides, so we can get an idea about what you're working with. So why don't you just start your presentation, and then we take a longer Q&A session afterwards, because since we can't invite our audience to ask questions, I think we can just continue our own Q&A, and hopefully that will be interesting for other people as well. Can we do that?
Yeah, well, let's go for that.
Okay, that's great. So I will just turn off my microphone, and then I will turn it to your presentation, and I will be back with you in the moment that you, as I can see that you're finished. So thank you very much so far. So take it away.
All right, so I wanted to talk about starting a business as a smart factory. So one of the big questions that I get asked all the time is, why build a business now during a pandemic? And the pandemic has triggered a couple things. For one, the pandemic, I think, moved people along. Honestly, I think about 5 years ahead in the future as far as their buying habits and their willingness to adopt virtual technologies. So you see people buying a lot more online. You see people being eager to use digital platforms, being less likely to want to interact in person with people, being less likely to want to even go as far as like, seeing a physical proof, doing a press check, those kinds of things. They don't want to come in necessarily. So we've transformed very quickly into this digital environment, and because everything has been set by Amazon, we see that expectations of people are now at that Amazon level. So turn times have decreased, customer service has increased. It's a more demanding environment, and we were headed this way naturally, but the pandemic shortened that time period by a lot. By years, caused adoption with people that never would have adopted it otherwise. So the other side of that is it brings about the importance of automation, because doing more with less. At this point, you may have employees that get sick, they may be out for 2 weeks, they may be quarantined, they may be working remotely, working from home. So being able to be a bit more agile, being able to allow employees to do more from home, to do more remotely, and being able to automate more tasks means that your business can survive, because you don't know. You may lose employees for 2 weeks suddenly. So also having things put in a clear and concise way through automation and through digitalization, so that any employee can jump in and succeed. This isn't a matter of trying to scale down. This isn't a matter of trying to replace people. This is a matter of survival for your business and trying to get the most out of people when they're in a very dynamic situation. So, well, and actually, let me answer that first question a little. Why do this during a pandemic? Well, a lot is changing right now, and we're seeing a lot of traditional shops are not able to rise to the occasion. And we're seeing a lot of other digital shops that are kind of floundering in the market or don't have the offering that they should. So there seemed to be a good opening. And now was the time to jump in and try to do something right. And by building a company based on automation, I think we can fill a void that we're seeing in the market. So that's the why. So let's talk about building for automation here. Big things. Think before you buy, be willing to adapt. One, let process drive everything. So really, you want to map through all of the processes of your business. You want to think about and try not to think about the technology that you have. Try not to think about brands or ability. Just think of capabilities more than features. And that's what needs to drive things. So you need to think about your process, what's going to serve your shop, what's going to serve the customer, and build the pieces around that process. So when we're thinking of equipment, there's toner presses, there's inkjet presses, there's offset presses, web presses, sheet fed presses. I wouldn't think so much about each one of those kinds of equipment and think more about the need, think about the product, think about the speed, how you're going to get it out. Think about interconnectivity. These days, more and more manufacturers are stepping up. We're getting more equalization in the market. I feel that a lot of, I'm sure that the manufacturers hate to hear me say this, but I think that there's less and less differentiation. We can get very good quality out of most machines. We can get very good, registration and speed, and they all run approximately the same speed these days in their given segments. So I think that there's less manufacturer differentiation, and it's more about look at the interconnectivity. How well can you plug these devices into your workflows? How well can you plug these devices into your processes so that they can talk to each other, so that they can fulfill their given purpose? And that's where I say, look less at features, look more at purpose. And same with software. Think about interconnectivity. All of these things need to talk to each other. Your MIS needs to be able to talk to your workflow. Your workflow needs to be able to talk to imposition, needs to be able to talk to your presses, needs to be able to talk to your binder equipment, needs to be able to talk to any automation, conveyor systems, things like that you may have on the physical plant side. But truly try to step back and look at the big picture there. And that's hard because every vendor is always going to focus on their given features. Every vendor is always going to focus on their given abilities. But I'd really encourage everyone, and I'll say any of you that have been, following my path through the industry know that I recently at my previous company, made a big change to kind of standardize on a vendor and on a single vendor. And I want to state that especially when you're doing that, there's nothing wrong with doing that. Having good standardization is important, but especially when you're doing that, make sure that you're looking at the big picture and you're looking at your whole shop holistically and not looking at how you can build a shop around a vendor, but on how you can build a shop that's going to function and process for your customers, and you can plug vendors into that. You might standardize on one if they're the best for the fit, but besides that, have to look at it holistically. And the fourth thing that I have there, floor plan, that is down to the design of the building. Well, one of the things that has been kind of an eye-opener for me coming to this new company down here is we have an incredible maintenance team, and I've been blown away at the ability for them to literally tear down and build walls down to the inch, and do that literally overnight, reconfiguring the building. But I've been blown away at how valuable that is. And that's a big part of matching your processes and looking at things. I've been used to looking at things in an unconstrained environment digitally, in an unconstrained environment with software. But down to the floor plan, down to the positioning of the equipment is just as important. And I'm sure that a lot of you old school guys that have been here for a long time are very accustomed to that and thinking about that in terms of floor plan. But it's after moving around a lot of big heavy equipment that I've done recently in reconfiguring this shop, for as daunting as that is, it's not as difficult as it may seem. And I would encourage you to, all of you business owners out there, to take a hard look at that and consider the moves. It is strongly worth it to match your processes. Just again, keep your processes based around the customer, based around what you're delivering, not around vendors, not around specific equipment. Removing subjectivity. That's a big part of being successful in these automated environments and a big purpose of what the automation is for. So I've talked a lot about that over the years and doing that with color. Certainly we want to, I've heard people refer to their eyes as spectrophotometers, their fingers as calipers, and no. People are good, but no one has that ability, and that has a lot of subjectivity to it. And the idea is you want to be able to enable all of your employees to succeed. You want to be able to enable everyone, whether they are new, whether they've been around for a long time, to succeed, and that just means removing subjectivity. So coming up with methods where people can use automated systems like inline spectrophotometers. Again, lots of vendors, whether they are offset, digital, inkjet, have at this point inline spectrophotometers, inline checks to make sure that your print is consistent. If you can't have that, I always recommend doing offline spectrophotometers. That's always nice. Then you can have one standard piece of equipment, one standard process for all technologies that you may have under a roof, for all vendors that you may have under a roof. So that's something that highly recommend, highly suggest, but it extends beyond things like color and actually QCing the piece and goes straight to things like shipping. In your MIS, can you scan the job, show picture of the job to make sure you're getting visual validation to make sure that you are shipping the correct job? Can you proactively calculate and show weights that will match what you're going to ship so that the shipper can make sure, oh, this weight is off by 30%, there's probably a mistake here, things like that. Maintenance. Most equipment these days keeps track of when maintenance is done, allows you to log it into the RIPS, allows you to log it into analytics software, and at that point you can start doing predictive maintenance. Those are things that you can also load into your MIS and start providing predictive analysis so that you're saying when things are going to break, when things are going to fall apart before they do. And that can be known at a company level by integrating that into your MIS. These are all important things in building this smart factory environment. And again, in this wonderful world that we live in, most MIS vendors and most RIP and equipment manufacturers are capable of logging these things and are starting to log these things. But these are the types of things when I say think before you buy, rather than just buying a press because it looks good and the samples look good. Buy a press because it has this kind of ability built into it to proactively track your maintenance. Every machine can be made to look good. Every machine can be a machine that you can be successful with. There aren't many vendors out there these days that are selling something that you can't be successful with. So look at these things, look at how it's going to fall into your processes, look at how it's going to fall into your business model more than the output off the machine. You'll find a way to be successful with the one that fits your process best. And proofing. Removing subjectivity, showing the customer a proof that is going to remove as much subjectivity as possible, whether that's showing something that is going to appear as color accurate as possible on their monitor, something that is going to, one of the great things of digital is it allows you to make true proofs. You can make things where it's going to run right off of the production device, but you can do a proof of one, and that allows the customer to see it not off a different device than it's going to run in production, but off the real device. So again, we're removing subjectivity here. We're giving the customer the final piece. We're giving them a perfect proof, and that's a big deal in removing subjectivity and setting the expectation correctly. So it sets the customer up for success. They know if they have to change anything, and it sets you up for success because now you're going to be able to deliver what you produced. And custom doesn't have to mean complicated. So what that means is if everything is able to be documented, if everything is able to be documented in your ticket, if everything is being able to be documented in your MIS, and this is why MIS is really the linchpin. Data is everything, and having that so that you can log every task, every step, every operation, and the details of every task and step and operation, that leads your production people to success, and that makes it so that you can give them complicated jobs, but they know exactly how to do it by breaking all that down. We don't want to introduce subjectivity, and that's interpretation. So dynamic tickets is a big part of that. If we put too much information on the tickets, then things get lost, the details get lost because people get used to skipping steps. So having dynamic tickets that show the operators exactly what they need to know when they need to know it is a method for success. And standardization, documentation of best practices, when we can keep that stuff in the MIS and we can keep that where the actual operator is going to live, then it's setting them up for success, so they're not needing to jump to other systems or other ways to find out how to be successful. It's all there in the primary tool that they use. So digital mindset. A lot of in our industry, when we say digital mindset, we're frequently thinking of digital presses, and that's focused on digital toner, inkjet, and I want to say that that's a digital mindset is not about press platforms. A digital mindset can apply to offset as much as it applies to anything else. A digital mindset is really about adaptability, integration. It's about agility. A digital mindset is about being able to flexibly adapt to your customers' needs. It's about being able to do short run, do long run, and it's about interconnectivity and being able to utilize digital systems, whether that's web to print and the MIS, but to utilize digital systems with your production technology to optimize it. That's what a smart factory is all about, is interconnecting these things and linking them together. Buying a workflow that can't talk to your press doesn't help you much. They have to be able to interconnect, but that goes beyond any digital printing toner or inkjet and extends to offset, extends to gravure, it extends to every type of printing that exists.
So interesting, Diego. Let me just this is we have some kind of, can you hear that is I have some issues with the sound.
Oh, I hear you fine, Martin.
Okay, I just tried to figure out what's going on here because I can hear the echo. Hang on a second. Funny. Okay, I hope it works like this way here. So, but it was a great presentation. Thank you very much. Can't help think about a little bit, because when you look at some of the things that you're talking about. For example, I mean, because I like the way that you started how to build the company or the processes where you started saying that it's about the mindset, it's about how you do things, and these kind of things. Is that when you focus on the things, because we have also in some of your King of Workflow articles, you have also been talking about how to address these issues, of course. In your opinion, is it because this is something that people actually still think about more about hardware and software and how they do that rather than the processes, for example?
Yes, well, and that's what I'm saying is one of the biggest pitfalls, the things that you can fall into is it's easy to get excited about features, and it's easy to get excited about specific things on a press or a platform, but if you're not looking at how it's going to interconnect and how it's going to affect your whole process, truly a really cool, shiny tool that stands alone is worthless compared to a bunch of normal standard tools. I mean, I've got a lot of equipment here that is old. I've got a lot of equipment here that is, old designs or old, Heidelberg die cutters are just as good now as they were 50 years ago. And the best tool doesn't always have to be shiny, doesn't always have to be something new and hip with digital in it. The best tool needs to be something that fits in your process and fits in your workflow. And old tools like that can fit in your workflow. And sure, can I send JDF to a old Heidelberg die cutter? No. But I can build a ticket system around it that's going to show exactly what needs to be done and show the die lines and show how the die lines interact with the piece, essentially tying that piece of equipment into the workflow. I can automate how the die line is pulled out. I can automate even submitting the die line to have a die created so that there's no timeline issues there. There are ways to automate even old equipment. So,
but I can't help think about, because now you said that, for example, with the new company you're working with, it's a new company, and I was just wondering, because how much do you think when you think about processes, how much is that? One thing is you have a process, but think that if you do, let's say, only do like one-sided print, let's say you do posters, for example, the processes are way simpler than if you have complex books in different formats, different bindings, and different print techniques and things like that. So let's say that we have a printer watching this webinar here, and they want to look into their process and how much does the legacy of products and the diversity of offerings, because if you look at, for example, commercial printing companies, they often have jobs where every job is almost unique, right?
Yes. Well, and that goes back to kind of what I was saying about how custom doesn't need to be complicated. As long as that is able to be portrayed in the MIS, which is why MIS configuration is so important. And having an MIS that you have a lot of control over, because a lot of old school commercial printers are, as you said, they're based around unique projects that they've been able to do that others haven't been able to do. And that's oftentimes why they exist. Coming out of the online space where I'm used to having hundreds of thousands of customers, you get a lot less of that, but there are fewer online printers than there are normal commercial printers, and a lot of the normal commercial printers have a handful of customers, and it's a handful of customers that they're very good at. They've done adaptive processes for, and what I would say is you can still bring automation into those scenarios, and a lot of them have automation, but it's very strict and rigid based around that one thing that they're doing for that customer. That's just where you need to build flexibility into your MIS so that every one of those things can be accounted for, so every task can be accounted for and described, costed, billed for, and once it is describable, then it becomes automatable from a digital point of view. Not just a written process. And at that point, then you can take those kind of crazy custom one-off things and still automate them. It just needs to be described and represented.
But I totally get that one, and one of the things I am maybe sometimes a little curious about, because I think it's quite obvious for most people why we want to have automation. For example, we want to get rid of repetitive work. We want to get rid of errors. We want to be a smart factory where things are smooth and operational. But when it comes down to the penny, so to speak, don't you think, it's a leading question, but don't you think that it's also a little bit depending on where in the world you live? Because if you live, for example, in countries with extremely low labor costs, and maybe also different level of expectations for quality and things like that maybe that doesn't apply to all printers in the world.
I would argue that the cost, the cost of building that kind of digital automation, especially with a lot of providers going into SaaS models, that makes it so there's often not the large upfront cost. There's still integration. Everyone that embarks on automation needs to be prepared that integration and implementation is the real cost, not buying a piece of software, not buying a piece of hardware. It's integrating and building it into your systems. That's the difficult part. That's the expensive part. But I would still argue that I would struggle to think of any large successful shop that wouldn't benefit from this. I mean, and I'm defining large as, say, 5 million or more. The costs are well worth it. Just think about any rejected job, and even when you have cheap labor, that's when you think of the cost of a rejected job and how much that costs versus putting in systems that could have prevented that and that could have allowed that cheap labor to produce better quality. And I would also say then the opportunity cost of what jobs are you not getting because you're not producing the quality that you could.
But I totally get your argument, and I think that it's I totally agree with you. You know that, but sometimes you just have to ask the counter question kind of thing, because I was thinking that if you look at the US, there's a lot of mom and dad shops, like with small family-owned companies where maybe they have a 1-2 color offset press in a smaller format. Maybe they have an older digital machine. I'm just trying to put them a little bit in a position where I'm exaggerating. But look at these companies. They maybe be 80% of the total American market. Maybe revenue-wise, it's only like 20%. And then the remaining, if you look at even the larger companies, maybe from 30 people up, you still see a lot of people that don't really want to invest in the level of automation that you are a brilliant ambassador for. Is it because, when we look at the smart factory, is it because because we can and the need is less? That I don't mean that, but I would like to hear your opinion about it.
Well, I mean, not to be overly crass about it, but as I'm looking at the auction sites to buy up equipment here and there, it's the small mom and pop shops that I'm seeing that are being hit most right now by the pandemic, and that's it's largely because of that. When you build a company where you don't have those processes that allow you to adapt quickly, to scale quickly, and to service multiple types of customers, then you're painting yourself in a corner, and losing a customer or two could be the death of your company. And part of what the automation gives you is adaptability. And again, it doesn't need to be expensive. A lot of these vendors, big equipment vendors, whatever your most expensive piece of equipment is, which generally in a shop is a press, a lot of those guys, they want you to succeed. They have platforms. you can lean heavily on them to get this kind of automation built in, often by them at low cost, because they're looking at their next sale. They're looking at, or you talk to anyone that you're buying consumables from, and the consumables people want you to buy more consumables. So that's why we see a lot of consumable companies like Fuji, with plates and chemicals, and Fuji has some great workflow solutions too. Fuji has some people that can walk you through setting up your workflow, very smart individuals, but not just Fuji. I mean, Kodak, same thing. There's lots of brands out there, but the point is anyone that is getting consumable revenue from you wants you to succeed. And that's why we see all of those companies investing so heavily in workflow and automation, because they know that's the key to you getting more customers. That's the key to you being more agile. And being agile right now means you're going to thrive. If you're not agile, those are the ones that I'm buying equipment off of.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because one of the first over the Skype interviews I did was with Heiko von Gaal and Jutta Hendricks from Canon Europe, and I was so stupid. Sometimes as a journalist you have to accept that you are not as wise as the people you interview. But I said to them, so it was about the new IX 3200, and I said to them, is that only for the larger companies? And they, it's more about people that have the right business mindset and the right applications. Then this press is also good for them. So size is not the question. It's more about having the business approach, how to utilize these things. And I believe that what you're saying is that the companies that goes out of business now may be the companies that have not seen how to develop the companies, how to take advantage of the technologies like automation and identifying that the smart factory and Industry 4.0 is a fact regardless of size of company.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, if I were a small mom and pop shop, would I want a automated robot to move my pallets around? Probably not.
Oh, you would like it. You would like it. I know that.
Yes, but there's different levels of automation at each level. But as per kind of my last slide there and the wording that you came up with, it's mindset. It's less about the equipment that you have and more about the mindset. And the mindset extends whether you're a small shop or a big shop, whether you're a 2-person mom and pop shop, or whether you're a 1,000-person large online printer. It's all about the mindset and looking at that process over the way that things have always been done, keeping, this is how I service this customer. Look more broadly at how can you be agile? How can you adapt to your customers' needs as they change and change quickly? Most customers' needs have changed dramatically during the pandemic. So how do you rise to meet that? And that's that digital mindset.
And it's funny that you mentioned that, because on our Friday session, the last one we have on Friday, we asked the question, are vendors actually able to support PSPs in the transformation into not just the equipment and the solutions, but also how transforming your business with the mindset that you were talking about right now. So you have been working now in a smaller company and in a larger company, and obviously you are important to many vendors, at least in the past, for your size of your checkbook. But I was just curious, do you think that from your knowledge, that I'm not trying to ask you to pinpoint at anybody's particular, but do you think that the vendor side is good enough of being able to educate and teach PSPs about both the opportunities and the pitfalls in these scenarios?
Yes, I think that most of the vendors have stepped up and have these departments, they have these people. One of the things that I would encourage any of the smaller companies is reach out. A lot of times those resources are thrown at the big companies and not at the small companies, but they are just as available for the small companies. It just gets talked about a lot less. So you need to be more proactive if you're a small company. You need to reach out more to them, but those resources exist. There are people at every one of these companies, and I'm particularly anyone that you pay monthly, anyone that you pay consumables to. They want you to succeed. They want you to grow. Their business is based on you succeeding and growing. Reach out to them. Be proactive. They will help you. All of them have that.
If we look a little bit back to, again, the first slide where we talk about the processes, I can't help think about, because let's say that we are a company, that the companies are thinking about how to move forward into this digital mindset that we're talking about. What comes first? Is it the business plan, talking more about the business objectives, or is it a starting point from where you already are? How do you think that that a printing company should? I mean, because I don't know how it's in the US, but I think personally, from experience from Europe, I think there's a lot of printing companies who really don't spend too much time on business plans.
Yeah, I think business plan is very important. I think coming up with your objective is extremely important. I say that's actually a lot harder if you're an existing company that already has some momentum, because it's easy to just kind of say, oh, well, to do what we've been doing, but more. And that's not a plan. That's not a plan. You need to not only identify the market, but also assume that your markets aren't permanent. Assume that change is going to happen. And again, we can see the companies that had plans when the pandemic hit, and they've been able to pivot quickly. They've been able to adapt, and they've been able to focus on serving their customers' needs, even as their customers' needs change in a huge way. Those ones that we talked about before that are more based around, here's what I do for this customer, I've been doing it always for them, and there's a lot of companies that are based around one customer, and not just one customer, but one customer and one project from one customer. That's a really scary place to be. And that's where you have to look at what are your business objectives, and be selfish about your business objectives. Don't think about that plan of how have I been servicing this customer. Be selfish and think about how is my business going to thrive in a changing market, in a market that customer could disappear at any moment. Where are you going? What are you going after? But you have to have a business plan there.
Can't help think about, I think it's a last question I have, maybe second last, because you mentioned that the equipment come quite far down in your list, and the equipment should basically just be possible to add to the processes and to the software and to the workflow and all the things we spoke about. As you know, a lot of printers in the past have always been looking at, take the sheet and look at it and smell it, and how does it look well, and things like that. And I think that is difficult to change from day one, of course, because I think also a lot of things in this industry is about the visual and how it touch and feels, of course. But I was just wondering, do you think also that having the smart factory and being automated, will that give you opportunities to also develop new products and services that can, for a printer who's normally thinking about the product, can justify to go into that direction as well?
Absolutely. And I'll say I'm no different. I look at the paper.
I know. I have seen you at Printing United last year, so
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and we all have a passion for it, or we wouldn't be in this industry. And it's exciting and it's fun, but that's why I just say, as a word of caution, just don't get caught in it. It's important. You do have to be producing quality. You do have to. Every printer does have a cool, neat little feature to it, but don't get caught in it. You have to look at the bigger picture. You have to step back and see the whole thing. It's, from that perspective, I do think that most things you will find additional markets that you can go into. You'll find additional features out of pretty much every piece of equipment, and that's where set the goal as a company, build a process around it, and plug in the equipment. And it's rare that anything is so specialized. I think when you do that and you back away, because a lot of people go into buying a device with a specialized intent. They're buying it because there's a need. They're buying it because a customer drove them to say, oh, well, we need to do this, so we're going to buy this so we can do this. Don't fall into that trap. Step back, look at your total company objectives. Maybe that fits within your company objectives, but make sure that the machine is not so specialized that it's not addressing your overall objectives. Just addressing one customer, one need, I've seen that bring down multiple companies. Where they bought it for that customer, then they lost that customer, and now they're stuck with a piece of equipment that is so specialized it doesn't fit their overall business plan.
Final question, because it just reminded me about one thing that we have totally forgot to talk about. Because Industry 4.0 or the smart factory, that is not something that applies only to the printing industry. Do you see demands from end customers demanding a deeper integration directly into the production workflow of a printing company? Like, let's say that if you have like some of the bigger brands, whether it's signage or commercial print or whatever it is, do you see also a demand from the buyer side as well?
Yes and no. It's coming. I don't think it's here yet, but it's coming. I've seen little glimmers of it here and there, and a lot of that has to do with tracking. And again, a lot of that is with both tracking of quality, tracking. I mean, I've done that actually for many years in terms of tracking of quality for when you're outsourcing things and subbing things, but that's usually a printer to printer. Haven't seen it from end customers as much yet, but it'll come. When I've been on the vendor side of the equation, I've talked to customers here and there that have asked questions about that. I think they don't believe it's possible yet, but the industry is headed that direction. We all need to be preparing for it. It will come. I just don't think it's quite here yet.
So yet another reason also for at least starting serious considerations about the smart factory and 4.0, Industry 4.0. Diego Diaz, as usual, it was a pleasure to have you on board. Thank you very much for taking time. I know it's early morning in Dallas. Any plans for the weekend?
Print.
Okay, I shouldn't have asked. So thank you once again. Talk to you soon. I will just switch off the recording now, and thank you very much for now.
Thank you, Martin.
So that was Diego on a pre-recorded session from Dallas. I don't know what you think about this, but I just think this is I think it's great because you hear people, one thing is this theory we hear, then we see the supplier side of this, but I think that Diego is such a great example of a doer. He has a curiosity for these things. He has been fortunate to work with companies who can afford to give him what he needs. I think that's a situation that most of us would be dying to get into, right? So I'm just pleased. I don't know if there's anybody has any questions or want to join. If you want to join, you can just click on the speak hand, and then you can join the session. It could be wonderful to Nick, you are online still. Jörg, Matthew, Henrik, Shaq. I mean, anybody who wants to participate in this end node, because this is the final node before the day is over. So this is an opportunity or a threat. I don't know what you think. Nick, he wants to participate. That's great. Nick, I just accepted your request. So now you just have a small process to get on board. Anybody else who wants to be part of the conversation? Amazing with new technology. I mean, Anthony, in the previous session, he had so many difficulties getting with his mobile phone because his laptop broke. But again, it seemed that the technology, I mean, to be honest, I think that this webinar jam software we're using is maybe not the most fantastic software, but it do have some quite good and Nick is working through it. So it depends. He probably had to click, a few times to, make sure that sound, video, everything works, and then he will be here. It was so great, by the way, just for people who don't know Nick. When we were in Wiesloch at Heidelberg a couple of weeks ago, he was there. I couldn't recognize him because he was he had the COVID haircut. And I haven't met him in person before, but I have written together with him. So it was great to see people that also participating here. To be honest, we have not had so many live visitors as we expected for this subject. But I think that, we have the opportunity to make a lot of replays, because I think the content is important. I think it's great. And again, to get back to Diego, as I mentioned in the introduction to him, he's one of a kind. I think he's very closely related with vendors. He has a background from Canon himself also. So I think that he understands both the vendor side and the PSP side, and maybe even more important, the customer side. So, okay, I got a new request. That's still Nick. Do you have difficulties, Nick? I have not tried to be the one that actually get the feedback from the presenter, but I think that Jacob was able to find out. So you should be able to do that too, I'm sure. So the Diego thing, his hands-on approach to everything is essentially something that I believe is a huge advantage. And welcome, Nick. Finally, you got in here, right?
Hey, Morten. Hopefully it's.
How are you today?
I am good. Let's try to get a video here.
Oh, there you are.
All right.
Okay, so good to see you.
Yeah, likewise. I really enjoyed the presentation. Another thing I wanted to add to the discussion is when we're talking about implementing the smart print shop, culture is also a huge aspect, and getting everyone on board, from management down to people in production. And I've seen that firsthand working for a company called Mimeo. I was sent from Memphis to Berlin to help set up a new location, and the success of that went well beyond just the technical aspects and the workflow, equipment, pricing, which is of course all critical parts, but I really want to bring up the culture aspect and making the mission clear and getting the buy-in. That's so critical.
It's funny because when you mentioned this, first of all, I'm sure you saw that both Jacob and Anthony in the previous session also mentioned culture. But I can't help think of that you were the only one that signed up for my last webinar that was about how people, when they buy equipment, for example, if you go from when you buy, for example, inkjet, how it influences that you sometimes takes away work from other departments, and how much influence this can actually have in a company when you introduce new technology. And I think that when we talk about lights out production, we are essentially talking about eliminating jobs, right? When we talk about optimization of everything, it's essentially eliminating jobs, or at least move them to other positions in the company. So of course, cultures have a huge influence in this discussion, right?
Yeah, when you dig deeper into Anthony's story, and I'm a little sick, so excuse the voice.
That's okay.
Even to an extent, turning down customers, turning down work that doesn't fit the design of the smart factory, right? And that's another radical way of thinking. But to some respects, if it's designed to do a certain type of work extremely efficient, then there's going to be sacrifices and reductions that traditionally would seem so radical. And what do you mean we're going to turn down work and go elsewhere? But
But that's true. And you work with Heidelberg you work with the software and the Prenect and all the things, right?
Correct. Yep.
And what is when you look at your work? I'm not specifically asking anything about Heidelberg, but do you think that companies the size of Heidelberg and the work you do you also have the time to get let's say the culture perspective into the discussion?
Yeah, that's a critical one that we see, into offering a solution for customers and guiding them through to reach success. So it's definitely something that's taken into consideration.
And I mean, because what is it you do specifically with Heidelberg? I can't remember.
Yeah, so I work with the Software Solutions Group. We have an offering, Pronect, that's been in the market for a long time. And we switched the past few years to a software subscription model. So day in, day out for myself, the past 2 years has been, how do you transition to a one-off license to a software subscription?
And is it fun?
Yeah, lots of challenges. We've seen a lot of growth, but you know, what's interesting about software subscription, you talk about the smart print shop, how changing that offering to really being a partner with the customer, and you're invested because they're subscribing each month. And it's not a one-off license where, thank you for your business, good luck, but you know, really delivering month in, month out. And that goes back to your comment about making sure they're successful, because if we don't deliver that, they can unsubscribe. So also on the vendor side, there are challenges and expectations to making sure you really pull through for like a workflow offering.
But it's funny because that was exactly what Diego was talking about, that especially when you have subscription services or if you have consumables, and you have an even higher interest in keeping everybody alive, right? Because that is the opportunities to see, we get one more visitor. This time is Henrik, who yesterday spoke about robots. So that is fantastic. No, so basically it keeps you on the edge, right? Because you always have to deliver something, because you never know if they will pay the next credit card bill, right?
Yeah, you want to create a win-win scenario on both sides.
Yeah. Henrik, are you there?
Yes.
Turn on your camera if you can.
Hey, Henrik.
It is turned on. It is turned on, I think. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, but the camera is the green button next to the microphone at the top.
On air, the green bottom next to the microphone. Yes, up there.
You should have a robot doing those kind of things for you, right?
Now it should just start to learn to do things. Huh?
But
so trying to get on this year took me off the conversation for some time. Huh? But I would just say that when I went to business school many years ago, we learned that specialization is the key to competitiveness. Huh? And that's what you just confirmed now, that if you have these, shall we say, Christmas trees which can do everything, you're not competitive. Right? So you should specialize on your equipment. Then I have another comment to all this here. That is that when I started to learn about lean, they said it's very important that you have a person allocated to run the lean process. And the same thing my robot friends are saying, if you want to implement robot into the system, you need somebody who is responsible to run this here. The question is, of course, do the companies have resources to allocate persons for this here? It seems that they're so pressed already that they say, we don't have persons for this here. And then the whole project goes sour because nobody really wants to take responsibility.
That is true, but I think that Anthony and Jacob also said that maybe some of the part of the Industry 4.0 is more about finding the companies who are profitable, who have the mentality to go there. Yeah, and I think that also Nick, from a Heidelberg perspective, I think that I made an interview with Stefan Plens at the last Drupa, and as far as I remember, and it's free from memory, and I'm getting older, drinking too much red wine. So, but as far as I remember, he said something like that. Instead of going for the hundreds of thousands of printing companies, we go to the tens of thousands of printing companies, because we also need to strengthen the company so we have a size in the market that is way more aligned with the demand of print, because that will make companies more profitable, right? And I think that also, Henrik, that maybe answers a little bit to what you're saying, that it's a matter of identifying the companies who have the resources.
Qualifying the customers, huh?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Nick, you are so fortunate that working with software, do you have to take into considerations also these aspects of the markets and how it's addressed, or do you have salespeople to take care of that?
In terms go to market and positioning the offering around the world. Is that yeah. So when you talk about software, we see around the world the perceptions of it drastically vary, and you go from the mature markets to developing ones, and what's the perception. But I'd say worldwide right now we're all going through COVID, and from my personal opinion, I think if anything what that's done for the perception of software, for those who may have disregarded before or not understood the true importance, it's fortunate in a sense for the software vendors, Heidelberg included, that during these times, people are really seeing how critical that is. And you spend all this money on this printing press, right? But if the utilization rate is so low, why wouldn't you consider end-to-end workflow and help be more efficient? So it's interesting how in an unfortunate circumstance like COVID, it has certainly shifted awareness in different parts of the industry, which the speakers have all said, it's really accelerated different areas.
I can't help think about one thing when you said developed and the underdeveloped countries. As an American living in Europe, do you see there's an adoption difference in an acceptance of workflow automation from US to Europe?
I saw a study by Keypoint Intelligence, and the customer sample pool, so the interviews that they did, the percentage of customers who couldn't articulate or weren't aware of this concept of a smart print shop and end-to-end automation, both in Europe and North America, it was astonishing, the percentage of companies of all different sizes who are still, in a sense, behind the ball in that topic. So I still think there's equal opportunity between Europe and North America. And
I was maybe not thinking so much about the equal opportunities. I was thinking about whether you see that there's, I mean, is there a higher level of adoption in Europe compared to the US or vice versa? Because I was thinking that maybe in general, the salaries in Europe is maybe a little bit higher than in the US, and therefore maybe the need for automation and these things in Europe were maybe more aligned with where the industry is moving right now.
I've seen quite a bit of similarities actually between Europe and the US in terms of where they're at with adoption.
I got a question from Jacques, my good colleague from Benelux. He says, will SaaS vendors be kind of hijacking the printer customer once they have connected in the cloud? That's a good question, isn't it? And I can answer for you. I can answer for you, Nick. You will say, no, of course not. Never. What do you think, Henrik? You are an independent. Will the printer who doesn't pay his bills to the SaaS vendors, will he be jeopardized for a 1 month payment? Yeah,
I would guess so. You have the person on a specific point there, and if you don't pay, you are excluded from further services. Huh? I would imagine.
Yeah, I think this is up for a conference on that subject on its own, but it's quite an interesting subject actually. But well, guys, I think I appreciate that you joined, both Henrik and Nick. It was great to see your pretty face, at least.
Yeah. Well, you didn't see me, but you saw me yesterday. So
yeah, that was more than enough, I tell you guys. So no worries. No.